What if you woke up each morning not knowing if you'll find enough food to eat, or what you'll have to sell, perhaps even illegally, just to make it through the day? In Cuba, this is the stark reality many face daily. Women have to think hard to maintain their beauty, when something as simple as hair dye can cost a significant chunk of their monthly income and is often only found on the black market. The streets are filled with people selling anything they can, turning survival into a daily hustle. And when a stranger offers to exchange your money, you have to ask yourself, who can you really trust? Stay with us as we uncover the rawness of life in Cuba, a side you've never seen before. Cuba, an island rich in history, culture, and contradictions. It's known for its stunning beaches, charming streets lined with vintage cars, and welcoming people. But behind the picturesque vistas lies a much more complex reality. For tourists, Cuba often feels like a frozen-in-time paradise, where you can sip a mojito on the shores of Veradero or stroll the streets of Havana. The vintage cars, colorful buildings, and salsa music create a nostalgic atmosphere. It's a place that beckons those curious to experience a culture shaped by decades and a unique political system. But what most visitors don't see is the daily life of Cubans. The reality beneath the surface is one of struggle, sacrifice, and restraint. It's a life far removed from the freedom and ease most people are used to in other countries. For Cubans, survival often means overcoming shortages, government restrictions, and a lack of basic necessities. While tourists enjoy all-inclusive resorts and carefully curated experiences, Cubans live a parallel life where food is rationed, dissent is a risk, and opportunity is scarce. One of the most surprising things you will encounter in Cuba is the phenomenon of long lines and scarcity. It's not just about waiting for your morning coffee, it's also about waiting for essentials, sometimes for hours. La Victoria neighborhood in Havana, Cuba. This is where you'll find Plaza de Carlos I, one of the city's largest shopping malls. From the outside, you might expect a bustling shopping mall experience, but what you'll actually see is very different. Long lines of people sit patiently, sometimes stretching around the corner, all waiting for their chance to enter the store. The people you see are waiting their turn to buy the most basic necessities, food and personal hygiene products. In a country where scarcity is a daily reality, accessing essentials isn't as simple as walking into a store. It requires a significant sacrifice of time and patience. Some days they spend the entire morning doing this routine, with no guarantee that what they need will still be available when they get home. Waiting for hours without complaining is a testament to their strength, to how they adapt to survive. This may be foreign to many of us, especially if we come from places where you can get anything at the click of a button. Scarcity affects social interactions, the pace of life, and even dating culture. Imagine planning a date but first having to queue for basic necessities before you can even think about impressing someone. In this context, time becomes a valuable currency. For those who live here, this is just part of life. In places like Havana, where resources can be scarce, you learn that patience is not only a virtue but a survival skill. Have you ever experienced waiting in long lines just to buy daily essentials? What are your thoughts on how scarcity shapes everyday life in Cuba? Share your perspective in the comments below. When exploring Cuba, one thing you'll quickly notice is the constant hustle of Cubans. It's not just a side hustle or a way to make some extra cash, it's often a necessity in a country where market shortages define daily life. You won't find aisles filled with everything you need in government-run stores. Instead, most goods are in limited supply, and availability can change from week to week. This scarcity has given rise to an entire underground economy, where people sell whatever they can afford. It's not uncommon to see someone sitting on their porch, reselling products they've bought from government stores or goods that relatives have brought back from abroad. These informal markets are an essential part of life. Cubans often rely on these smaller local vendors to buy essentials that can't always be obtained through official channels. You might walk down the street and see a woman selling laundry detergent she bought in bulk at a store, or a man selling imported clothes he managed to get from a relative living abroad. At first, it may be surprising to see people selling from their homes or on the street, but you'll soon realize that it's just part of the way things work. Someone's porch becomes a mini supermarket, and conversations about where to find certain products become a normal part of everyday life. It's a way of adapting to circumstances, of making the most of what's available. For Cubans, this system fosters a sense of community and resourcefulness. It's not just about buying and selling, it's about connection, trust, and the daily grind that keeps life running smoothly in a place where scarcity is the norm. Before continuing, I have a request for everyone watching. If you can help me, it only takes 10 seconds to hit the subscribe button. This really helps our channel grow and means a lot to us. In return, my team and I are committed to continuously improving the program for you. Do we have a deal? For many Cuban women, beauty is more than just vanity, it is part of their identity. Cuban culture places a high value on appearance, and women take pride in maintaining their beauty. However, in a country where basic goods are often hard to come by, staying fashionable and well-groomed is no easy task. Something as common as hair dye. In Cuba, a dye that might be considered cheap elsewhere can cost up to a third of the average monthly salary. This is a huge expense when you consider what many people have to do to make a living on their limited incomes. Luxury products, such as makeup or skincare, often cost much more than Cubans can afford. Cuban women have to be resourceful, creative, and patient. They can save up for months to buy a product or rely on informal networks to source essential beauty products. Yet despite these challenges, Cuban women can still look gorgeous and well-groomed. The reality is that most Cuban women, like many others, rely on relatives living abroad to send them money or goods. Without this support, even basic necessities, let alone luxury items, become nearly impossible. Families with members living in the United States, Europe, or Latin America often rely on them to send much-needed supplies, from food and clothing to beauty products and medicine. For women, this dependence often means juggling multiple responsibilities. They manage the household, care for children, and ensure their families have what they need, all while relying on remittances from relatives. In many cases, Cuban women are the breadwinners of their families, using every resource they have to maintain not only appearances but also the family. How do you think their resourcefulness in the face of challenges shapes their identity in everyday lives? Let's start a conversation about the unseen struggles they face and celebrate their spirit of perseverance. Leave your comments below. There is one topic that resonates deeply with parents across the country: feeding their children. In schools, children's meals are a constant concern for parents, as the government's ability to provide adequate and nutritious food has been stretched for decades. Even when parents sacrifice, giving up their own food to ensure their children have enough to eat, the situation remains complicated and often heartbreaking. A typical school meal might consist of something as simple as bread with corn tortillas, a far cry from the balanced meals that many families in other countries might take for granted. And even this basic food is becoming harder to come by. The price of food items like eggs, which are typically a simple and affordable source of protein, has skyrocketed to levels that are almost unimaginable for a Cuban family. A carton of eggs can cost between 3,000 and 3,500 pesos, or about $10. To put that in perspective, that's nearly a month's salary for many Cubans. In Cuba, where scarcity and economic challenges have shaped society for decades, the prices of basic goods paint a picture of the hardships people endure. When you walk into a Cuban market, something as simple as a pound of pork costs more than 1,000 pesos. At first, this may seem shocking, especially when you consider that 1,000 pesos is a significant portion of the average Cuban's monthly income. Such high prices force people to make difficult choices. Many opt for cheaper processed meats like ground pork or other alternatives just to save a little more. It's not uncommon to see people selling everyday items like plastic bags or homemade goods just to save enough money to buy a few pounds of meat. The scarcity of basic foods like pork, flour, and bread reflects a larger problem: the difficulty of obtaining even the most basic items. Take bread, a staple in many Cuban households. The bread you see in stores today often comes from what are called handbooks, a government-run food rationing system. But even that bread is in short supply. There have been times when the weight of bread has been reduced simply because there wasn't enough flour to go around. Waking up at 3 or 4 a.m. just to buy a loaf of bread. In some parts of Cuba, that's exactly what happens. Long before the sun rises, people line up at bakeries, hoping to get a limited supply of bread. This isn't just an occasional inconvenience, it's a daily reality for many families. Despite all this, Cubans remain incredibly resilient. Whether they're waiting in line for bread or eating whatever processed meat they can find, they understand that they're all in the same boat. For many Cubans, the day begins with one main goal: finding food. It's not as simple as walking to the nearest supermarket. Instead, it's a daily task that requires perseverance and often a little luck. They wake up with a list of tasks that are not about growth but simply getting through another day. The search for food starts early and there are no guarantees. Prices are high, supplies are low, and most goods are out of reach for those without extra help. And when local options run out, many Cubans turn to family or friends abroad for help. Remittances, money sent from Cubans living in places like the United States or Europe. Stores known as MSMEs and MLCs, where prices are sky high, rely heavily on this support. But for most Cubans, these prices are from another planet, making them dependent on their overseas relatives. In fact, these stores seem designed to squeeze money out of foreign boyfriends, relatives, or anyone willing to send a little extra cash to ensure their loved ones don't go hungry. While you may see wealthy neighborhoods in Havana, the vast majority live in much more modest conditions. The economic disparity is huge and affects every aspect of life, from the food on the table to the quality of the buildings people live in. In Cuba, everyday life comes with certain precautions, especially when it comes to food and water. While in most places it is easy to take clean drinking water for granted, things are a little different in Cuba. The treatment of tap water is inconsistent. Some days the water is heavily chlorinated, to the point where you can taste the chemicals and it leaves a heavy feeling in your mouth. Other days the opposite is true, with the water supply contaminated due to poor infrastructure and water shortages. For Cubans, their stomachs are more resilient, having grown accustomed to less than ideal water quality. But for visitors, drinking tap water can quickly lead to stomach problems or worse. The best way to stay safe is to stick to bottled mineral water. Cuban cuisine relies heavily on staples like flour, sugar, and fat, but there is a dark side to it that you should be aware of. In many local eateries or street markets, the same cooking oil is used and reused over and over again. This not only affects the taste, but also poses a health risk. Stick to reputable restaurants that pay attention to hygiene and food quality. You don't have to splurge on fancy gourmet places or dine at the same table that Obama sat at, but be careful. Even well-known restaurants can have supply issues, depending on the country's current economic situation. Transportation in Cuba is more than just getting from point A to point B, it's a journey fraught with challenges and risks. In Cuba, traditional buses and reliable public transportation are scarce. Instead, many Cubans rely on old, repurposed trucks for long-distance travel. These vehicles, often loaded with cargo, ferry passengers across the provinces for around $2. These trucks are not safe. They are often old, poorly maintained, and prone to accidents. Cuba's roads add to the danger. The private taxi system may seem like a more convenient and safer option, but you need to be careful. Instead, use a state-run taxi or arrange transportation through a trusted local. You may pay a little more, but that $5 could make the difference between a smooth trip and a dangerous situation. Prevention is better than cure. Now let's move on to another type of journey: internal migration within Cuba. Many people are drawn to Havana for its opportunities, those seeking a better life, but for many internal migrants, life in Havana is not easy. In Cuba, living in Havana as a migrant from another province can feel like living on the edge of the law. Many migrants come to the capital without proper documentation, and as a result live in a sort of legal limbo. These individuals are often looking for better employment opportunities or simply a way to make a living, but they face discrimination, housing challenges, and legal restrictions. For those who want to delve deeper into the darker side of Cuban society, from gossip culture to relationship tensions. In Cuban culture, gossip or chisme is more than just small talk, it's a way of life. Small, tight-knit communities allow news to travel quickly, and people often seem to keep an eye on their neighbors' every move. Locals often talk about a kind of jealousy that runs deep in Cuban society. The constant scrutiny of neighbors and friends means that privacy is a luxury most people don't have. Your personal information, your relationships, even your work can all be monitored. If you're a foreigner, this culture of gossip can make it difficult to fit in or maintain a low profile. Everyone seems to know what you're doing whether you want them to or not. Cuba's economic situation has had a profound impact on personal relationships, especially romantic ones. Financial hardship has changed the dynamics of dating, often placing material expectations at the forefront. Women, facing their own economic hardships, may seek relationships that offer financial security. Many Cuban men have noticed this shift, with love becoming less important than financial security. When exploring a new country, especially one like Cuba. The curious person quickly realizes how closely the country is tied to tourism. The vibrant streets of old Havana, filled with the echoes of history and the rhythms of salsa, are a testament to this. Cuba's dependence on tourism is both a strength and a weakness. When tourism is strong, businesses, both legal and illegal, benefit. Licensed vendors sell local handicrafts, food and souvenirs, while many individuals find other ways to make a living, often engaging in informal or even illegal business. As one local said, Old Havana, one of the best preserved areas, highlights Cuba's dependence on tourism. In recent years, the Cuban economy has seen an interesting shift with the emergence of new markets, especially from foreign countries such as Russia. The emergence of Russian stores, often compared to Costco, signals the growing influence of foreign countries. If you have been to Varadero, one of Cuba's most popular vacation destinations, you may have noticed that signs throughout the city are now bilingual, with Russian accompanying Spanish. It has been said that a Russian supermarket will soon open in Cuba, selling everything from household goods to imported Russian meat. As one visitor commented, it's interesting how the stores are starting to open and even the Russian market is making inroads into the country. If you go to Varadero, or if you have been to Varadero, you will notice that all the information signs throughout the city are in Russian. It has been said that they will open a Russian butcher shop. As these new establishments open, the level of surveillance has also increased. Visitors to these stores may notice an increase in the number of security cameras and restricted areas where recording is prohibited. Cuba has a unique dual currency system. There are two main currencies in circulation, the Cuban peso cup and the MLC moneda libremente convertible, also known as the magnetic stripe currency. The Cuban peso is the official currency, which you'll use for most everyday expenses, such as buying food, drinks, and visiting local attractions. It's the currency most commonly used by Cubans in their daily lives. The MLC, on the other hand, is essentially foreign currency such as euros or US dollars converted into digital form and loaded onto a magnetic stripe card. This card can be used at some stores and businesses, mostly those that sell imported goods or cater to tourists. The MLC card is essential for purchasing high-demand, scarce items in Cuba, but you won't be carrying around physical MLC receipts. Everything on the card is digital. As one local explains, in Cuba, there are two currencies: MLC, which is the foreign currency that is loaded onto a card, and Cuban pesos, which is the one you'll use most for eating out and visiting sites. One of the most difficult aspects of handling money in Cuba is the fluctuating exchange rate between the foreign currencies, Cuban pesos, and MLC. The official exchange rate is set by the government, but on the black market, the rates are often much more favorable. This can be tempting, especially if you're trying to get the most value for your foreign currency. You'll find plenty of people on the street willing to change money for you, one tourist commented, but again, if you don't know them, who are you going to complain to? This is sound advice for anyone unfamiliar with the local economy. Black market money exchanges may offer you a better deal, but they come with significant risks. Counterfeit money, incorrect amounts, or simply being shortchanged are all possible outcomes if you don't know who you're dealing with. When exchanging money in Cuba, it's best to go through trusted sources. Official exchange offices or hotels will usually give you a fair rate, and while it may not be as good as the black market, the peace of mind is worth the difference. You won't have to worry about counterfeit money or shady dealings, and you'll know exactly how much you're getting. Havana, with its old-world charm, colorful buildings, and bustling streets. However, beneath the surface of the city lies a pressing issue that affects the daily lives of many locals: waste management, or rather, the lack thereof. In Havana, especially in non-tourist areas, mismanaged waste has become a visible and ongoing problem. While tourist areas are meticulously maintained, giving visitors the impression of a clean and pristine city, other neighborhoods tell a different story. Trash piles up on street corners, accumulating for days or even weeks. For locals, especially in less visited cities, the presence of trash near their homes, schools, and workplaces is a daily reality that threatens their health. As one Cuban resident pointed out, the problem of trash is persistent and unresolved. It is not visible in tourist areas, but in almost every corner, there are dumps that threaten the health of residents. This disparity between well-maintained tourist areas and neglected local neighborhoods is significant, and it can help visitors get a more complete picture of the challenges facing Cubans. While you may see the clean streets of Old Havana and the beauty of the Malecon beachfront, a trip to the city's less visited areas will quickly reveal a different reality. The problem is not uniform across Havana. Some cities and regions are more affected by trash than others. Wealthier districts or those with frequent tourist arrivals receive more government attention, with regular garbage collection and maintenance services. However, in less affluent neighborhoods, especially on the outskirts of the city, the situation can be dire. Cities like Centro Habana and parts of La Lisa often experience delays in garbage collection, leaving residents with overflowing trash bins and makeshift dumps. In these areas, the lack of consistent garbage management services has become a symbol of the larger economic difficulties facing Cuba. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Click on the video that appears on your screen right now. I'm sure you'll love this content. Comment below about the next country you want to see featured on our channel. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video. Thanks for being with us on this great journey. Leave your thoughts in the comments and like to help us. Remember to subscribe for more. See you soon.